So how are the war on drugs and psychiatry connected? It's a good question. The war on drugs, like what happened with the US military and boats off, I think, Venezuela recently, or just in general, as far as people being arrested for manufacturing, selling, distributing, or buying, or trafficking various narcotics and substances. Sometimes street pharmacist is a term that's used. So within psychiatry, which is considered a branch of medicine, which if you think about objective medicine, psychiatry is actually fiat medicine opposed to objective medicine. So it's like pseudoscience. Psychiatry is quackery. Now, people can consume all sorts of various drugs, both legally and illegally, for any infinite number of reasons. Antidepressants, neuroleptics, aka antipsychotics, anxiolytics like benzodiazepines, hypnotic drugs like Ambien and Lunesta. There are many classes of psychiatric drugs, some of which are used illicitly with regards to people not having a quote-unquote legal subscription, people needing a permission slip to obtain or use a certain drug like Adderall. The generic name for Adderall, I believe, is amphetamine salts. It's not that much different than methamphetamines, although it does get processed by the body somewhat differently, I suppose, but not a whole lot differently. And then, of course, there's all the pain drugs like opiates, morphine, Oxycontin, fentanyl, so on and so forth. And then there's the plant opium. So psychiatry is the medicalization of problems in living. Read the book Our Right to Drugs, The Case for a Free Market by psychiatrist Thomas Szasz. Also consider reading his other book, The Medicalization of Everyday Life. In principle, all drugs should be legal, at least in principle. The state of Oregon, I believe, had legalized all drugs, or decriminalized, or basically made it a little slap on the wrist, a little traffic ticket if you're caught with under, a certain amount of, fentanyl or LSD or so on and so forth. Then they changed the law, I believe. I heard somewhat recently, so now it's maybe a misdemeanor, but for 3 or 4 years, there's basically zero consequences. And my understanding was, though, that littering laws and disturbing the peace and so forth were not being enforced, and it was a worse crime for like a minor to consume alcohol than for like somebody to smoke fentanyl in front of children, which I don't think should be happening. People should not litter needles. Littering needles should be a severe offense. Not having a house and littering everywhere, littering laws should be enforced. We don't need people littering everywhere. It's not productive, it's not fruitful, it's a waste. So if all drugs are legal, if other laws that are just are not enforced, this creates lots of problems. Certain drugs can sort of be very not conducive to being a functional member of society for various reasons. Somebody is smoking meth or so forth a bunch, or shooting with needles meth. Like, it's probably hard to be a productive member of society if somebody's up for 2 or 3 days and crashes, or whatever, how long people are up on that drug, methamphetamines. It's not fruitful, it's counterproductive. Drugs can be very dangerous. People can have all sorts of habits and reasons for using drugs. I believe in one of his books, psychiatrist Thomas Szasz says something to the effect, the difficulty one has like stopping a drug is related to, the reasons one has for using a drug. Now, Thomas Szasz was a psychiatrist. So again, the whole idea of this video, how does the drug war relate to psychiatry? Well, psychiatry is almost like, in cases of non-consensual psychiatry is almost like sort of non-consensual attempts at domesticating people, or at least non-consensual attempts at sort of enforcing secular moral codes of behavior, on changing people's behavior. Now, sometimes in psychiatry they say the goal is to alleviate quote-unquote mental illnesses or psychiatric disorders. And that's a whole topic for another video, the fact that The Myth of Mental Illness, another book by psychiatrist Thomas Szasz, the mind can only be metaphorically ill. The mind cannot be literally ill. The brain can be literally ill or sick. The mind cannot. Now, somebody could be poisoned by, if they overdose on heroin or fentanyl and they stop breathing, well, they could have brain damage from that. Or, if someone does so much methamphetamines that has, it's not pure, it's, has a bunch of extra poisons in it, effectively. I mean, they can get nervous system damage from that, probably. People can get nervous system damage from psychiatric drugs, is my understanding. Tardive dyskinesia, akathisia, tardive akathisia, neuroleptic malignant syndrome, sudden cardiac death. So perhaps being sober is sometimes a very fruitful thing. And medicalization can have unintended consequences. So, people are going to keep doing illicit drugs. So, if there is a way for people who could afford it, or at least wouldn't engage in crime to obtain it, if they could obtain known quantities of pure substances, well, it might be a lot safer. And there might be less sort of tertiary or secondary crime associated with such drugs. So to summarize my thinking some, the drug war has unintended consequences. The drug war creates a black market. If all drugs are legal, well, that can also have unintended consequences. So just laws need to be enforced if, people need to be held personally responsible for the behavior. So if people are using drugs and being irresponsible and breaking laws, so on and so forth, well, they should be held accountable for that. But yes, I agree with psychiatrist Thomas Szasz that at least in principle all drugs should be legal, as a human right. And then also psychiatry has unintended consequences. Medicalization has unintended consequences. So we should try to look at those too. I think what RFK is doing with, critically examining certain societal systems, I think that's probably good. Joanna Moncrief and Roger McFillin, PsyD. Joanna Moncrief's a psychiatrist. Joseph DeWitt Dorning or Joseph Dorning DeWitt. I think it's Joseph DeWitt Dorning or Doring. Joseph DeWitt Doring. Also have the last name's flipped. He's pretty critical of psychiatry, but he is a psychiatrist. But he runs taperclinic.com. And then Roger McFillin, PsyD, has the Radically Genuine podcast. And then Joanna Moncrief is a psychiatrist who has been, critical of child psychiatry, and the fact that Joanna Moncrief, as a psychiatrist, has sort of said that just all psychiatric drugs are really, in one sense, no different than any other recreational drug. They just change how people feel. They might numb emotions or make people tired, or up or down, stimulate them in cases like Adderall, or put them down in cases of like Ambien. And really not that much different than street drugs. It's just they're sort of socially acceptable drugs, and that has its own consequences. So anyhow, I guess what I'm trying to emphasize is personal responsibility, libertarian principles. Again, I'm not condoning illegal drug use. I'm not recommending illegal drug use. If you think the law should change, we'll peacefully work to change the laws. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Limitless peace.